Okay. So, yeah, but like I said, that'll be, um, give me another week and I'll have a better idea of what what the summer is going to look like and the fall. So I have an idea, and I think I like the idea for the fall. Um, I just got to flesh it out a little bit more. So
We were getting ready to study the book of Genesis, and what I'm hearing is I don't need to be worrying about getting ready for that because there won't be enough time to do that.
Yeah.
no, I mean, unless you want to do a really quick overview, but you couldn't really do the Book of Genesis justice in 4 weeks. Um, not
I think
unless you.
we'll go back to our James Moore
Hmm,
book
yeah,
that we can do week to week.
sure. Okay. So, all right. So Acts 24. So here is where we see um, Paul in Caesarea. We see that at the end of 23, he arrives and the letter's read, and Felix says that I'll give you a hearing when your accusers arrive, and so he's ordered to be kept under guard in the headquarters. So then chapter 24 opens with 5 days later, Ananias shows up, who's the high priest, and he brings an attorney, and that should always get the dun 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 kind of music, right?
Yep.
The lawyers, when the lawyers enter the building, it's going
Beware.
to get interesting. So, so
Either
they
that or
bring
the
in,
Elmer Fudd music.
Yeah. Yeah.
so the attorney's name is Tertullus, and he comes in, and he basically has all of the he just sort of drips and oozes out his like, oh, we're going to make you feel really good so that you'll listen to us. As Your Excellency, because of you, we have long enjoyed peace, and reforms have been made for the people because of your foresight. We welcome you this in every way and everywhere with utmost gratitude. I mean, it's just pouring out.
And
And then he's like, but to detain you no further, I beg you hear us briefly with your customary graciousness. Then in verse 5, he finally gets to the point. We have, in fact, found this man a pestilent fellow, an agitator among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and so we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to learn from him concerning everything of which we accuse him. And then, just as if it wasn't enough that this lawyer just piles on all this stuff, he says, the Jews also joined in the charge by asserting that all of this was true. So, if you noticed, and I hope you did, that verse 7 is missing. Just go look. That's done on purpose, because verse 7 is a depending on what your Bible, maybe your Bible just automatically includes it, but that verse is it's not in the oldest manuscripts, and so so there's a note in my Bible that actually starts. It's actually the notes on 24:6, and it adds verse all of verse 7 and part of an additional part of verse 8. So this is what it reads. So I'm going to start with I'm going to start in 6 and then add verse 7 and the first part of verse 8 and then continue with the rest of verse 8. So this is again the lawyer speaking, Tertullus. He says, he even tried to profane the temple, and so we seized him, and we would have judged him according to our law. But the chief captain, Lysias, came and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come before you. And then he says, by examining him yourself, you will be able to learn from him concerning everything of which we accuse him. So for some reason, verse 7 is not in some of either the most, it's not in all of the manuscripts, and more than likely it's probably not in some of the oldest manuscripts from which they're drawing all of this. Now, there are several places in the New Testament where this happens, and it's not something to just be like overly concerned about. I mean, the you know, if you want to be overly concerned about it, that whole scene with the woman caught in adultery in John, that's not in some of the most ancient manuscripts of the Gospel of John too. So if you just want to, you know, keep that in mind, but it's still an important story. Now, here, verse 7 doesn't add too much to the narrative, except for the fact that you know, Lysias, who did his very best to paint himself in a good light to Felix in his letter that he wrote, now is kind of getting thrown under the bus by the Jews, because they're like, he just yanked him out of there violently when we were about to, you know, have our opportunity to charge him and to judge him according to our law. And then all of a sudden now we have to show up at your place. So anyway, all right. So just so if people ask, that's what that's about, is that some of the manuscripts, the original language manuscripts do not have verse 7. So you maybe can have some conversation around what their Bible says, if there's a note in there or not, or if it just automatically includes it. So
King James has it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. All right. So the questions, are any of the charges against Paul capital charges? Why or why not? The only one that's really like a capital charge is the stirring up trouble kind of charge. You know, one of the things that the Roman Empire prided themselves on was keeping the peace, the Pax Romana, and they would do that in whatever ways they could. And typically that was violent ways. So it's interesting that they would keep the peace through violent measures, but 'tis the way of the Romans. Other than that, the Romans didn't really bother with Jewish matters. We've seen this before in the book of Acts, where the Roman authority was appealed to, and he goes, this isn't my deal, this is y'all's deal, y'all figure this out. And he kicks it back to the Jews. So this is, you know, again, it's you know, an agitator, somebody who's stirring up the people and causing discord and causing there to be riots. That's something that yes, the Romans might concern themselves with, but for the large majority of what they're trying to do, it's their charges that the Jewish people are interested in, not necessarily the Romans. So should Felix be hearing the case? Maybe. I mean, you know, it's one of those deals where Lysias kicked it up the ladder, and so now Felix has to deal with it. And we'll see this happen again by the end of, let's see, by the time we get to the end of, or the beginning of 25, you know, it's going to get kicked up the ladder again to Caesar eventually. Not right then, but eventually it'll get there. Okay. Okay. So then, beginning in verse 10, this is Wednesday the 31st reading. So this is Paul's defense. This is how he is defending himself, and he cheerfully makes his defense. And it feels like we've heard this before. It feels like we've, heard this testimony over and over again. But Paul much more quickly gets to the point. He says, I cheerfully make my defense, knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation. And verse 11 starts his defense. As you can find out, it's not more than 12 days. So he's been, for less than 2 weeks, he's been in Jerusalem. And then now he's been in 5 days. He's been in Caesarea. So, I mean, he was in Jerusalem like a week and all this happened. So kind of keep that in mind. They did not find me disputing with anyone in the temple or stirring up a crowd, either in the synagogue or throughout the city. Neither can they prove this to you, this charge that they bring against me. But he does hold up to one thing. He says, I admit this, that according to the way, which they call a sect or a faction of Judaism, or a sort of a rebel group of Judaism. Interestingly, both Pharisees and Sadducees and the Essenes and those kinds of folks, those are also sects of Judaism as well. But somehow, because the way involves himself with Jesus, that they're sort of this farther outlier than the regular ones. He says, I worship the God of our ancestors, believing everything laid down according to the law or written in the prophets. I have a hope in God, a hope that they themselves also accept. So there he goes, pointing back at them and going, they like this too. And I wonder if the Sadducees kind of wrinkle their eyes at that and go, wait, maybe not. Hold on there. Anyway, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. So he said, so he's basically saying, I'm a good Jew. I haven't abandoned Judaism. I'm not leading current Jews away from Judaism. And so, especially in the heart of Jerusalem. But then in verse 16, therefore I do my best always to have a clear conscience toward God and all people. So again, it's not that he's perfect. It's that he's, taking every opportunity to repent and to be reconciled to God as needed. So then he says, now after some years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to offer sacrifices. And while I was doing this, they found me in the temple completing the rite of purification without any crowd or disturbance. But there were some Jews from Asia. They ought to be here before you to make an accusation if they have anything against me. Or let these men tell what crimes they have found when I stood before the council, unless it was this one sentence that I called out while standing before them. It is about the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. So I'm gonna back up to verse 17. So he says, he came to bring alms to my nation and to offer sacrifices. This is the first time that we hear specifically out of Paul's mouth about this collection that he is gathering from the churches that he's been at, that have sent money to. This is the collection that gets a lot of ink in 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, there's a lot of talk about this collection for the Jerusalem church because they were struggling. And so he's appealing to the Corinthians. He's appealed to other places. He's like, some of these other places are less well off than you, but they gave joyfully. And so there's this whole thing of this collection. And so now he's bringing this, that was one of the things he brought to Jerusalem when he came, was this collection. And he calls them alms to my nation and to offer sacrifices. So that goes back to this, it's a gift that he's bringing. And while he's offering these sacrifices, remember back James, back at the beginning of 21, James was like, hey, there's some bad vibes out there about you. You may want to, help pay for these guys to go through their ritual purification, and you do it too. And so that's that scene there. So while he's doing this, they found him in the temple, completing the rite of purification. But he says there was no crowd, There was no disturbance. There was no riot going on. He wasn't like, riling up everybody. But there were some Jews from Asia, probably from Ephesus, um, and they saw something. Remember, a couple chapters ago, they saw something. They thought that Trophimus had gone in with him into the temple, and they saw him walking around with Trophimus, and they're like and then they saw him in the temple, so they made the assumption that Trophimus had gone into the temple, and so they got upset. But he says they should be here in Caesarea to make their accusations, but they're not there. Excuse me. So he says, well, these guys are here. Maybe they can make their case. But he says, really the only thing they can, be upset about is this one sentence, the resurrection of the dead. And that's why I'm on trial before you, which is what he said to the Sanhedrin. But again, that's a Jewish matter, not a capital matter. It's not something that Felix needs to be wrestling with. It's something that the Jewish council needs to be wrestling with. But when they were trying to wrestle with it, then Lysias pulled them out because they were going to tear them apart. Anyway, it's really complicated, but it's okay. So Paul defends himself quite eloquently. He's like, these charges are bogus, basically. That there's nothing they can stand on except for this one thing. I did say this. Yes, yes, I follow. Yes, I'm a good Jew and I follow the way, and they call it a sect, so they have a problem with it. But I'm not stirring up trouble. I'm not causing riots. It's actually the people who are against Paul that are stirring up the riots. And I didn't defile the temple. I didn't do any of those things. I did say that I am, hopeful for the resurrection of the dead. And that's it. And so every smooth-tongued word that came out of the lawyer's mouth is just, it's nothing. I mean, it's all talk. It's Johnny Cochran, if it doesn't fit, you must have quit kind of thing. Anyway. Johnny Cochran was a defense lawyer, so maybe that doesn't fit. Anyway, they call him a pestilent fellow, an agitator, a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He tried to profane the temple, and so, but all of those things, other than him being, a leader of some kind in the sect of the Nazarenes, which is just another way of talking about the Christians, because they didn't really have a solid term for them yet at this point. And that's the only thing they could get to stick. And again, that's nothing that Felix needs to deal with. So okay, so Paul does not lash out at his accusers. He does not, because he knows that all of their charges are bogus, and he knows that he can just wipe them off. He doesn't need to get angry. Even though he is being wrongly accused, he has this mature spirit inside of him that says, these guys are wrong. I know they're wrong. I know what I'm here to do. And so I'm just going to just lay it out there. And the resurrection stirs up the Jews just because they disagree about it. The Sadducees and the Pharisees, they can't come to agreement on that. And so they just keep rehashing it. And every time Paul brings it up, they just get angry and angrier and angrier about it. So that's how it goes. All right, then we see Felix's response. Verse 22 tells us Felix was rather well informed about the way, and he adjourned the hearing with the comment, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he orders the centurion to keep him in custody, but to let him have some liberty and not to prevent any of his friends from taking care of his needs. right? So, so a couple of things that these are historical kinds of things that that help flesh this out a little bit more about what he's doing. So, Felix would have been well informed about the way, because there would have been a high quality spy network going on throughout the Roman world. Like the Romans always wanted to know what was going on, especially in this area of the world and in the Holy Land, and then places farther east, because they never knew when some kind of insurgents might rise up. And so they would send out spies into their furthest reaches of their territories to hear what the people are talking about and hear what the rumblings are in the various places. And so they've heard about this way, this Jesus movement, and so that word would have gotten back to those Roman authorities in the higher levels, so that if something came up in their particular province, then they would be able to go, oh, that's what this is about. So that's how he's well informed. Initially when I read that and thought about that, I was like, I had the question of, well, how would he have known that? But whether, and I thought maybe he was just like, he was casually walking by, the church in Caesarea and the way followers there and kind of overhearing. But really, it's an empire thing that they would have had spies out there relaying information across the empire. So then he says, he adjourns the meeting when he says, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. It seems kind of ironic that he would say that, just because Lysias moved it up the chain to him and included what he already thought about it. So basically he's like, I don't know what to do with this. You just go away for right now.
That's basically what
it is. It's a big cop out. It's like, maybe we'll figure this out, maybe we won't. But Paul's going to go sit in prison for a little while. But it's not the Roman prison system is not the same as like the American prison system. Prisoners in Rome didn't get 3 squares, cable TV, exercise yard, anything like that. If you were in prison, you were responsible for, they didn't do meals, they didn't do anything like that. So if you wanted to survive in prison, you had to have connections to people outside of prison. And then the guards had to let those people in to provide for your needs. And so because Felix is not quite sure what to do with Paul, he gives him some license. He gives him some liberty to have the people come in and tend to his needs, bring him food, whatever. And he's going to, as we'll see in the next few verses, he's going to try to utilize that liberty that he's given Paul to try to make it better for himself. All right.
Before we leave that,
yep.
Something I found regarding that first question, that you mentioned the spy network, which certainly would have play in it. This is something else I found. It should be remembered that Caesarea was the place where a prominent centurion, Cornelius, had been converted, where Philip, the evangelist, and his 4 daughters lived, and where there were doubtless many influential Christians. Felix undoubtedly knew many of these, hence it is not unreasonable at all that he should have had a great deal of information about the Christians, plus the fact that his wife is Jewish.
Right.
So. Well, and he ruled for what, 6 years in Judea, and what was the other?
Don't remember.
Galilee.
But yeah, when you're around that long,
you pick up on that stuff when you're in the politics.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Whether you divulge it, that's another thing.
That's right.
Especially since you want to get bribes.
Yes.
You need to figure out where you can get them.
That's right.
Samaria.
Okay.
That's where the other.
Samaria.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So Felix is already showing some leniency towards Paul because he's giving him, you know, he's allowing his friends to take care of him. Now, like I said, he's going to be using that to his own advantage in just a moment, or try to use it.
Right.
So when we turn to 24, the last section of the chapter talks about that some days later, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who is Jewish. And I don't know if I'll do this on Sunday, but the first Drusilla I thought of was the stepsister from Cinderella.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I was like, I was gonna pop up a little picture, a little headshot of her, and go, not this one. No. But
No, don't do that.
that would just be for a cheap laugh, and see,
Yeah.
nobody in the room will laugh when I do that. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's not the same. If we were in person, I might do that, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So Drusilla is Jewish. He sent for Paul and heard him speak concerning faith in Christ Jesus. As he discussed justice, self-control, and the coming judgment, Felix became frightened and said, "Go away for the present. When I have an opportunity, I will send for you." I'll stop there for a second. So, so Felix isn't quite done with Paul at this moment. He brings his wife into the scenario, and they hear him talk about Jesus, and not just Jesus in the abstract, but faith in Christ Jesus. And they discuss justice, self-control, and the coming judgment. And I think here in verse 25 is where Paul starts poking at Felix. You know, a Roman governor is responsible for justice within their realm, under the auspices of the Caesar. And if Paul is poking back on how he's actually accomplishing that justice, then he's going to take a step back. And if Felix really is the self-serving kind of ruler that Roman history tells us he is, then he's not going to want to talk about self-control. He maybe has, you know, I think N.T. Wright said that he's probably never even thought about anything related to self-control in his entire life. But then when he gets to the coming judgment, it's not just judgment from Caesar, but it's judgment from God, and ultimate judgment. And you know, it seems like these three layers build on each other, and that's when he pushes back and he's like, no, you're going to have to go away because I can't handle this right now. And he says, so he became frightened. He was full of fear. He says, "Go away. When I have an opportunity, I will send for you." It's another way of saying, I don't want to deal with you right now. See ya. You go back over there. They'll take care of you. It'll be fine. And then verse 26 sort of circles back to how is this going to benefit Felix. So he says, at the same time he pushes him away, he also hoped that money would be given to him by Paul, and for that reason he used to send for him very often and converse with him. So he thought that the more he could bring him in and out and say, hey, you know, what's going on, how you doing, you know, tell me some more about this Jesus guy, you know, what are you doing? Paul probably took every advantage of that to preach the good news in those moments. And because he knew where he stood, he knew that there were the bogus charges that he was in prison for, but he wasn't interested in trying to bribe his way out. But you know, if when Paul said, "I came with alms for the nation," that somehow if he's got this pocket of money, or has rich friends, or networks that could gather some funds, then maybe he could get some of that and line his pockets, so that when his time is done as the governor in Caesarea, then maybe he'll have a little extra jingle in his pocket to walk around the streets of Rome. And obviously Paul does not do that, but then After 2 years, verse 27, after 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And since he wanted to grant the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So again, he just kicks it down the road. He doesn't want to deal with what I think what N.T. Wright said is that his leaving Paul in prison was hopefully going to give the Jews a positive taste in their mouth about Felix, so that when the new guy came in, they'd be like, they wouldn't go, oh, you won't believe what Felix would do. We're so glad we have a new governor. And then that word get up the chain to his higher ups, and then Felix get in trouble. So he's like, I'll do him a favor. I'll leave Paul because I know they're mad at him or whatever. I can't really do anything with him. I'll just leave him there. So Festus comes in and has this guy in prison, and then he'll deal with it in a little bit. That's chapter 25. So Felix is frightened because Paul's poking at him about things that he's never really dealt with, and things that can that in these conversations, these faith conversations that he's having to deal with. He's like, I can't look too deeply into my psyche or whatever for fear of what I might find there. And Felix is looking for a bribe because he knows his time is limited, and maybe that Paul's got some money and may be able to line his pockets. So there you go, chapter 24. So, all right. Did we cover questions? All the questions?
Yeah, you did great on that. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
I'm curious, why would the Sanhedrin not bribe to get their way? Why didn't the Sanhedrin bribe him to get their way?
That is a good question. I would guess because they're such a public entity that any even suspicion of that going on would not go well for them as a whole. They probably could have worked it through 2 or 3 back channels, and like sort of like what they tried to do with Judas and Jesus. They kind of like they paid him on the sly, but then when he came back and was like, I don't want this money anymore, they're like, they push it away with a stick because they can't even touch it because it's blood money. I think that they would have gotten implicated in that, and people would have maybe been okay that that Paul was eliminated. I mean, I think that if there was a way to eliminate Paul, that many of the Jewish people would have been like, all right, let's do that. But I don't know. I mean,
looks like we've got another. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
We've got another parallel going on here with Felix and Paul versus Pilate and Jesus. They both knew that the subject was innocent, but for political expediency, they opted not to let them go.
Right. So one of the things I'm going to do on Sunday with my message is, or this afternoon, you'll see it on Sunday, is look at a few of those parallels that are pertinent to Holy Week. And that very one about being in front of the Roman governor, and Jesus in front of Pilate and Paul in front of Felix, and how they basically couldn't do much with him, and for expediency or for keeping the political capital necessary to continue to do their job. They either, obviously Pilate, had Jesus crucified, but Felix had to, kick the can down the road till somebody else dealt with him, so he was out of power and didn't have to deal with it anymore. So yeah, I'm going to do a quick run through of the pertinent parallels. That's a fun alliteration for Holy Week between basically Luke 19 to 23 and Acts 21 to 24.
So that's what your sermon will be on?
That'll be a portion of my sermon for
okay.
Sunday. And then and I'll set it up with this particular passage, that actually 10 to 23, 24, 10 to 23 is my passage for this weekend. And I'll talk through that, and then I'll go, I'll talk about the parallels between what Paul's experienced over the last 3 chapters and what Jesus experiences in his final week, and as a setup for Holy Week, and go through those things, and then come back to Felix's response, and sort of push out into Holy Week from there. So there you go. And just a FYI, if you want to, my message for Easter is from Mark 16, 1 to 8. I figure I'll jump out of Luke for just a little bit, come back.
So this Sunday, you're doing what we just went over. No, we're going over 23.
We're going through 24.
We're doing the 24 that we just did today.
Yeah, that's Sunday's message.
Yeah.
And then Easter.
Starting the April 5th week is the one you'll preach on the 11th.
Correct. Yes, that would be chapter 25. So, which is the continuation of this ongoing saga. But Paul will finally say the words, "I appeal to Caesar," and that starts the clock ticking to get to Rome. But again, we'll see again that the Romans really don't know what to do with Paul. They're like, "What do you want to do with him?" "I don't know. What do you want to do with him?" "I don't know. What do you?" "Oh, let's just, So let's put him on a boat and see what happens. Very good. Like I said a few weeks ago, the action is fast and furious. I mean, we think about, we've since chapter 21 started to the end of chapter 24, it's been 2 weeks. And it's like, just think about all the things that have happened in 2 weeks.
Over 2 years in prison.
Right, and then you add the 2 years on, and then it's like, okay,
yeah,
now we're gonna have, now we're gonna figure out what to do, sort of. Very good. All right, what else can I do for you today?
How are the Fusons doing?
They are hanging in there. They're struggling pretty mightily, but they have a good family support network, and they've got meals set up to go, and we'll get information about that out to the congregation so that y'all can jump in on that too. And I haven't heard today from them, but talked to them yesterday, and they're just they decided to do an autopsy just because of they weren't sure of the circumstances that led to his cardiac event, and so it was going to be either today or tomorrow before his body would be released to the funeral home. And then once the funeral home has him, then they can make plans as far as the service goes. But
Dennis Dennis went to school with my two oldest kids,
Oh, okay.
so we've known Dennis for a long time.
Yeah. So yeah, they're utterly heartbroken, as to be expected. So, and actually, Janice West reached out to me to say, if they needed to talk because they lost their son at 19 as well. So I said I would pass that information along. But yeah, their son died at bonfire.
Yep.
Oh,
Bonfire collapsed. So
quick question, not pertaining to this, but is there any way, anytime during Holy Week that we could have similar to what we did in the summer, where we meet in the parking lot with our cars? And could you say the words over communion and let us serve ourselves? I know it's been so long since we've had a communion, and we talked about this in Sunday school.
right.
Any way
So,
we could?
Yeah. So if we did, it would probably have to be on a small scale because some of our portable sound system got damaged in the flood and the water break, and so as of right now, we aren't able to do that same kind of PA setup that we did in the in the fall. We are. You'll hear me say this on Sunday, but we are going to have an in-person sunrise service on Easter at 7, and we'll do baptismal renewal at that service. So I'm not opposed to doing some kind of in-person communion kind of deal. It'd have to do a couple hour window where I can be there and have people come in and just do a quick little deal. Let me
You could probably use one of those karaoke machines, if everybody's got their windows down and engines off ahead of time. I think you project enough where we could hear you.
Right. Let me. I'm going to talk to. I'll see Bobby later this afternoon. Let me chat with him about what kind of setup that might need. I don't know. Maybe I'll just get a megaphone and y'all can just sit outside your cars and I'll just yell at you through the megaphone.
Yeah.
However you want to do that. But let me check with him about what the feasibility is as far as our audio equipment. But I know that the reason we haven't done anything in the parking lot yet is because some of the equipment was damaged and we need to replace it, and we're waiting on insurance money to help pay for that. We've had other things that we've had to pay for, like the elevator. Oh my goodness, y'all, 40 grand to get that thing cleaned out and fixed. 40 grand.
Oh.
The
insurance had to step in, didn't they?
Well, they will pay us back, but we had to front the cost. Yeah. I don't know where Vicky came up with that money, but
yeah.
That's certainly one of those rob Peter to pay Paul kind of deals, I would imagine.
If you were to find out from Bobby what kind of additional equipment was needed, there might be money available from church members to help pay for that sooner rather than later, so that we could do what Sandy's recommended.
Sure. I know he's got those things priced out because they had to go on the claim that we submitted to the insurance company. So to replace what needs to be done, what needs to be replaced, he's already got those numbers. I just don't have them. So, so I can, when I talk to him, I'll ask him about that.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, well, again, I say this every week and I mean it every week. Thank you so much for what you do, how you lead well in your Sunday school classes, and I appreciate you very much.
Actually, I was starting to panic because it was going to go back to me having to figure out how to do the lesson every week. And with you do it, I'm kind of getting used to this.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah. I like
good.
it.
I do too, actually. I have a good time doing this.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Well, and I think it's beneficial to the whole church to have it tied in to Sunday school lessons, because then maybe we can get some more people coming to small groups.
Right. Right. Very good. Okay, well, I appreciate y'all. If you need anything between now and in your class time, just give me a holler and I'll see what I can do.
Hey.
Thanks
All right.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a great
Have
week.
a good day.
You too.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.